Hi, I'm Stacey Wilson-Hunt. Oh, here she is. Hi. Welcome.
I come on too early.
Hollywood editor for New York Magazine. This is Andrea, as you've probably guessed. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thanks so much for having me.
What do you think of the episode? Have you seen all of Bloodline? It's amazing, isn't it? I didn't know how they were going to top season 1, and it's incredible. As they did with Damages, it's like, where are they getting this stuff? I'm just consistently amazed. No, it's like a magic trick. That's really how I describe how they write. But before we get to Bloodline, tell me a little bit about how you ended up as an actor. What was your early training? You told me a little bit backstage about where you come from. What was your first entree to acting?
My hairdresser. Strangely enough, I had a hairdresser who was quite fabulous, and him and his husband had a salon. I was about 9.
And this is in what town? Where did you grow up?
Newcastle upon Tyne in England. He was into amateur dramatics, and he was producing a play, and he was sort of semi-professional, and I ended up doing my first job when I was about 9, and it was a play about Sir Ranulph Fiennes, you know, Ralph Fiennes and all the Fiennes. It was about their great-great-grandma, who was the first person to ride England's side saddle, and I played little Cecilia.
Wow.
That was my first job. Yeah. And so basically I grew up in a working class part of the northeast of England, and I had a little bit of a rocky time, and something that really helped me was theatre. And so I just kind of hid out in a theatre, and I would wait in the wings, and eventually they, kept giving me parts, and I had the great fortune to be at the People's Theatre, which is a theatre that housed the Royal Shakespeare Company. So I just learned a lot, and we got to do incredible things. We did Shakespeare and Chekhov and Ibsen, and by the time I went to RADA when I was about 19, and by that time I'd been in about 65 plays, and which sounds bananas. I don't know how the fuck how I was managing to fit that in. I was just a very tired child. I just remember being at school and hardly being able to keep my eyes open, hold the pen up and do the work. And of course doing terribly in my exams. I was academic, so I was, but I was an underachiever in that sense. So I was always on the verge of a B+, A- rather than kind of where I should have been. But I'd been in all the plays that we were talking about, but I was just too tired to write about it,
Was your family artistic? Did you have anyone at
No.
home? No.
No, my dad, his mum was an usherette in a cinema, so he grew up falling asleep in a cinema, and my grandma would carry him home at 11 o'clock at night, deeply unhealthy, seeing films far too, batting way above his age range when he was 4. But he watched Casablanca 5 times a week, and then he'd watch whatever else was on the next week. And my mum, they were both from very working class backgrounds, and my mum, second year I was at RADA, said, I'd always wanted to go to RADA. And I said, what? She just never really talked about it. And now my mum she has a master's in Shakespeare and Jacobean studies. And she's translated some texts that haven't been translated, and this has all happened in her 50s. So that's really
She was inspired
wonderful.
by you.
Yeah, and she didn't, I feel like in some directions I'm speaking super loud, and then in other directions I'm really quiet. That all happened in adulthood, and I got to go to her graduation before she did mine. So that was nice.
And when you did all that stage work, did you see yourself ultimately segueing to film, or did you see yourself? Okay, so
no.
you were in love with the theater, and you thought this is my home.
Right. I think in a way, it's such a good question, and we're all asked over and over again, what's the difference between theatre and film? And really, over the years, I've just said the difference is having the technique to turn up the truth or not. That's kind of just whether you have the tools to be able to give it to 1,500 people, or whether you have the intimacy and the sort of naturalism to be able to keep it very simple and quiet, smaller. But actually, I think I said my dreams came true when I was too young. I don't know, that sounds bananas to say, but I played Miss Julie when I was 23, like too young to play Miss Judy, really. And with Peter Hall and Isabella in Measure for Measure with the RSC very early on in my career, and did a lot of stuff like that. And I remember when I got those jobs, standing in the canteen of the National with Andy Garfield and Matt Smith, because we all started out together, going, oh my fucking God. Like, I never thought that would happen. I just didn't see that happening. And so almost after that point, I didn't know.
So there's sort of a curse to rising so quickly at that point.
I don't think a curse. I think a great blessing. I mean, all I did was work. I used to get to RADA an hour before it opened. They used to have to kick me out at night. I'd have all my acting equipment sitting on the steps when the caretaker came to open up in the morning. So I was, like deeply geeky. But no, I guess what I'm trying to say is I had no idea of what it meant. I had no idea of where it would lead me. I certainly didn't think that I'd be standing on the carpet at the Oscars with Birdman that many years later wearing a pair of Spanx. Like, that's always the really, really strange, like, I can't put those two things together.
None of us ever thought we'd be wearing Spanx.
Between Chekhov and Spanx, that's like a big, that was just the last thing on my mind.
Name of your autobiography right there.
Maybe it is.
It's good.
I don't think anybody would read it.
We would. We would. So at one point, did someone see you perform and say, hey, we'd love to cast you in a movie? Was it a performance that someone from Hollywood saw, or was there a local production that...
Yeah, it was Mike Lee.
Yeah. Oh, okay, that's a
Mike
good
Lee
person.
saw me play 3 crudely crafted, of my own creation, characters at the National Theatre on the South Bank in London, and I had a meeting with him, and I had to go into a room and pretend to be someone else for about half an hour, and he just watched me like a creepy stalker. And that was where our great relationship began. And I worked with him for quite a long time, and so I had quite an unusual introduction into film, because with Mike's films you don't have any sense of where you might be shooting on Friday if it's Monday. It depends which street the lead character walks down. You may or may not ever be in the film.
Does he? I was always curious about him. Does he give you the whole script, or does he only give you your portion? It's sort of like Woody Allen, where he covets just your part of the story.
There isn't a script.
Okay. So there's nothing to hide then. Okay.
There's nothing to hide.
So how do you work like that? And what did you learn from working like that? That must have been scary.
It's strange, but to me, it was almost more difficult to get into working in conventional narrative film after that. Almost confusing to me. In my mind, I'd be thinking, so the director's just going to talk about somebody else's, like, motivation in front of me. Secrets stuff that my character wouldn't know. I found that really strange, and it's just because I had an unusual entry into film. And Mike himself, we both went to RADA. He started out at RADA. He hated RADA. He actually came to give a talk at RADA, and I fell asleep during it, and he had to wake me up. Thank God he doesn't remember that. He thought I was someone else. But we had a tough schedule at RADA.
And I must know, what is it like to be directed by Madonna?
From RADA to Madonna.
Yes.
That's
the
just like
second
Chekhov to
chapter.
Spanx.
Very similar, yes. How did she find you? Because I remember when you were cast in that movie, there was so much pressure on, anytime a woman makes a movie, there's an immense pressure on her, from casting through production.
Right.
How did she find you? And it seemed like you found kindred spirits in each other.
Vera was going to play the role originally, Vera Farmiga, and she was having a baby, and so she pulled out. She's such a fine actress. So wonderful, yeah, and lovely person. But she was going to do it, and she pulled out, and so there was a search on. And I had gone for the first time to this is just a silly story, to the Met Ball in New York. I'd been invited, but nobody was going to give me a dress to wear. I couldn't get there. I had to get in a cab on my own. I got out in a cab on my own in this dress that I'd bought, which was disgusting. I look back now, I was like, well, what was I thinking? I stood in a line of behind Jennifer Lopez and everyone. Anna Wintour knew who I was because she'd invited me because I'd been in a play in New York, and she sort of had, this woman called Anna sent me flowers to this play, and I was like, this woman called Anna keeps sending me shit. It's really weird, because I just had no relationship with that world. I was such an idiot.
Were you still in England at that point, based primarily in England?
I mean, I'd been doing this play for 6 months in New York. I don't know where my head was. Just in work. I'm always just thinking about work, I guess. But Anyway, so I went to the Met Ball and I stood behind Jennifer Lopez. Everyone shouted Jennifer, Jennifer, and asked me to move out of the way. And then the next day, I got a call from Madonna, which was so weird. So that after that experience, I was so depressing, the Met Ball, and I went and drank half a pint of Guinness in the pub on my own afterwards, in my gown, and talked to the bartender, and I was staying in like a hostel, a youth hostel. It's just really funny. So as I was talking to the bartender, I got this message saying like, check in tomorrow, Madonna wants to meet you. I was like, this is so odd. I went to her house and had a cup of Earl Grey tea. And I remember thinking, firstly, I didn't have a fucking clue how she knew who I was, but I think she'd watched me play Margaret Thatcher, which is something that in Britain I had a certain amount of acclaim for. And it was kind of the thing that got me started with BAFTA and all that stuff when I was like maybe two years before that. So we had some Earl Grey tea, and she had a Picasso behind her, and I was like so taken aback. And my agent said, if you can, try and get a picture of the inside of a loo. I didn't do that. The first moment that I met her, I knew we were going to do it. And I had I didn't know whether I wanted to do something like that. I had no idea. But she was so clear, passionate. She knew every last piece of this story, you know, and the way that I work, and because I've played a lot of characters who really existed, or who really lived and breathed historical characters, that was really exciting, you know. She knew what she was talking about. Sometimes I'm on a production and I'm playing somebody who existed, and they haven't actually watched real footage of that person, you know, which is totally fair enough. Everybody has their own process, but she really, really was very specific. So we basically spent, after that point, every day together for 7 months, and the first month of that was us trying to find a prince, which was like the most stupid search ever. And then the film was made. I think she did a really good job of it. I didn't think that it all worked, but I thought she did a really, really good job of it.
I actually saw, I don't know why, it was on TV recently, and like, this is great. And you know, I don't know, I feel like the people were just ready to just mow her over, because the previous film hadn't done well, and it was sort of anytime she tries to do something that's out of the scope of what we think she should be doing, I think people are just so critical.
I was just really interested to see if that had been a first-time director and nobody had known who that was, how that would have gone down, you know, with the Weinstein Company behind it. You know, it would have been like The Imitation Game, which was, script was found, I'm sure you know, by two
his first feature,
tenacious
first big feature
producers who brought it to him. So,
but at the very least, the movie certainly gave you acclaim. Your name became a name that people here were talking about, and you know, it's the first time I heard of you to that degree. So it must have served you to, you know, be opened up for other roles.
I think in ways, and in other ways, yes and no. You know, I remember doing an interview where I used to live in Los Feliz with this guy who was writing for one of those like really trendy magazines that has like, you know, a trendy magazine, and in Britain, and this is my ego, but in Britain, I've always been respected as a Shakespearean actress, and that's the thing that I can, like, if there's one area of expertise, I was saying to my friends before, that I have, it's probably iambic pentameter. However, I found myself in this cafe with this guy who thought that I was the girl in the Madonna movie. And it was a very strange experience and very humbling and probably very good for me. But yeah, people were only really. It was interesting. A lot of people already sort of knew my work, and then it was different. But certainly it was. I don't really care about any of that. It was a fantastic experience to actually make the film, and I was so proud of the work that I did. And I was in my like mid-20s, and I was playing a 60-year-old woman, and that felt great. And you hardly ever get the chance to do stuff like that. Who gets the chance to do that? So I just felt fortunate to do it.
And of course, probably the biggest project that earned you more acclaim in Hollywood on a grand scale was Birdman. And this movie, I still think about this movie frequently. It's sort of like, I can't believe it happened.
Yeah.
I can't imagine what it was like to make, because just what you guys went through as actors making that movie just sounded so singular. But tell me what you learned from Alejandro about how a director interacts with his actors, because I know he has such an incredibly unique relationship with his performers that it sounds very different from anyone else I've ever heard of.
Right. My first meeting with Alejandro was on a street corner in Santa Monica. That was like no accident. We actually had arranged to meet on a street corner. And he sat down and he was like, Andrea, I don't think this part is going to work. And that was his like selling point for me. And I was like,
the script was done at this point. So the story was written and everything. Okay.
This is how he offered me the part. And I said to him like, oh, why do you think that is, Alejandro? He said, it's just not where it needs to be. I need someone like you. And I was like, I'm not sure. I don't know how I can help you. But we did kind of muddle through it. It was a strange, none of us knew if it was going to work. You know, sometimes 7 o'clock at night, we had nothing in the can at all. We'd been working since like 6 in the morning. We literally didn't have one shot in the can. We were like, this is going to be terrible. You know, we were really flying on the seat of our pants.
But you guys mapped out a lot of your, I'd call it choreography at Paramount, and then you went to New York and actually did it in the
which
theater.
For future reference is a total waste of time. Because when you put these things on the floor, these things here, that are like sticky tape, when you put those on the floor and they're neon, that's not the same as walls, it turns out. And so when Ed Norton, in A Pair of Underpants, you, Naomi Watts, and Emma Stone are trying to get through a corridor with Chivo, you're all going to fall over. You know, it's just like not possible to get through.
Carrying his enormous camera. And,
right, there's like 6 people behind Chivo. I mean, the amount of times that Naomi actually walked into the camera, it was just really, really funny. And actually, it was such a comforting experience for me because I did start in the theatre, even though for the most portion of my career I've been making movies. It was so comforting because we were filming it in a theatre. And it felt so, for Amy Ryan and I, it felt so
chaotic,
natural.
just like it does when you are putting on a live show. And that's what I thought was so special.
Right. But I think what I learned from Alejandro, to come back to your question, is that I could play a character that I didn't relate to at all, because I was playing an anti-artist, you know, somebody who's only interested in whether Martin Scorsese was coming to see the play, you know.
She also wasn't treated very well by her, you know, love interest.
Well, she
I felt sorry for her. Yeah, she definitely picked the wrong guy.
Yeah, she made a bad choice. But
people never do in the theater, I'm sure, when they date people they work with.
Never.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's very rare. Yeah.
But yeah, I was playing a character who I find it really hard to relate to, and Alejandro just brought everything back to being human, brought everything back to humanity, you know, and the sort of beautiful, broken, simple, flawed qualities that humans have, and that you can be a human within all of that and still care whether Martin Scorsese is going to come and see your play.
The two are not mutually exclusive. You can
They're
be a good person and care about how people perceive you. So Bloodline, I know how the guys who make the show, they also made Damages. They have a very uncanny way of working, which is they map out this epic story for which they hope will continue for years and years. At what point was your character introduced on their end? Did they know that she was going to show up in season 2? Or was this after season 1, they had a chance to revisit and they thought, okay, we know Ben's character is gone. Obviously, we knew that in episode 1, but when did they introduce your character, if you know that?
Right. I think probably Ben Mendelsohn got so successful and then left. And so they just needed somebody else.
He didn't totally leave. You still get to see him.
No, Ben, essentially the way they put it to me when we were first talking about it, when the conversation opened, which was via Skype, which is a completely new experience. I'm doing all sorts of things via Skype now, rehearsing, having a relationship with my parents. It's like a whole new world. But
had you seen season 1 at this point? Had you watched?
No, thank goodness, which I'll tell you about in a second. When the conversation started, they said to me, there's going to be an antagonist. And as soon as they said that, and because I've made movies more than I'm a novice with television, basically, so I don't really know how episodic things work. I didn't, you know, as soon as they said antagonist, I just thought antagonist for the next 2 years. You know, it's kind of, as an actor, that's what you feel, isn't it? You kind of like, oh, crikey, that's one of those...
It's a big commitment, really.
Yeah, and a strange headspace to occupy and the heart space and all that stuff. So then they talked a bit more about her, and I think That's my ring. I thought that was my phone. They talked a bit more about her, and they said she was a mother, and that also concerned me because I just didn't feel that I was equipped to play a mother. And then we had the conversation about perhaps she's totally ill-equipped to be a mother, and perhaps the dynamic between them is more one of siblings. And it all just seemed to start working. I started to imagine what might have happened had I gone down a different fork in the road in my own life. I've had quite an interesting past. And, it could happen to any of us. Any of us could have taken a different turn. And
and she's an artist, too.
She's an artist. And
we know that she had bigger dreams for herself, too, that she says, were cut short for whatever reason.
Yes, but none of the tools to execute, really what she wants. I think what she wants more than anything is to connect with people and to have security and stability, but she doesn't know what those things look like. And then when I met Owen, who plays Nolan, straight away we were like buddies, and I don't know whether that is a reflection on my immaturity.
Or his maturity.
Or what? He's very mature. He's like, it's funny because he's like I was when I was a child. But, acting when you're a child, you become this really irritatingly precocious sort of, you have all these facts in your head and everyone's like, shut up. He's very like that, so we kind of evened out. And we are like brother and sister on set. And I think that really fed into it. It took a lot of work. On the page, we have writers coming in and out, and that's completely new to me. I've only ever worked with one writer, sort of thing. So that we had new writers coming in and out. There were people writing for Evangeline who hadn't seen me play the character. They had no idea that I was, that I wanted her for her intentions to be absolutely good, but for the execution to be crappy, because that's the best she could do. And I wanted it to be rhythmic and soulful and extraordinary and kind of left field and unexpected.
Did you share feedback with writers about maybe tweaks or adjustments that they could make along the way? I know that's always a sensitive interaction, but were they open to that?
Yeah, scripts that weren't written by KZK specifically. I felt like I got a lot of scripts that were where I was reading an antagonist. She was purely antagonistic, and so. But the great thing about the show is that not only are you your own, your own character's advocate, and you really have to stand their ground for them, but KZK are always available any time of day or night to kind of talk about anything that you've got going on or which direction we should be going in. And they were so good at staying on the helm and devoted to that. Not their presence was always there. I could text them minutes before a scene, and ask them about something, and I get a response.
And you shoot in the Keys, obviously, but are they on set all the time? Are they in New York, or where's the writer's room?
One of them's always lurking around. Yeah, like Hitchcock, just popping up. Yeah, they're always there in spirit.
And whose creation? I'm so obsessed with the cadence of your character's speech, and also your accent is just so incredible. It's so hard to imagine that this is the way you speak, because her voice is it's very breathy and sort of lyrical. You can tell she's a musician by the she sort of phrases her words the way that music is phrased. And I'm wondering, is that something that you created? How did that all?
Yeah, I guess. I sent, it's really funny, I sent KZK this package of images that I'd compiled, which was everything from like Pollock paintings to men in opium dens in 1890 in China and like all sorts of abstract shit. And I said, I've sent a package with reference to the internal life of Evangeline, and I got a message back saying, did you send the right file? And, I was like, yep, just the way I roll. It was so wild. It was like woman having a period with a tampon, like just a whole load of shit of like what I just imagined was live like somewhere in Evangeline's psyche. But they now that we work together, they would completely expect something like that from me. I'm like, should it be more red or blue, But that was, I guess, the starting point, really. And I thought a lot about Cowboy Mouse, which is one of my favorite plays that a friend of mine wrote with Sam Shepard, who had been in Bloodline, so it felt like that was a nice little something that was within the fold. And it's a 15-page play. I don't know if you guys know, but it's like 45 minutes long. And it's, oh, did you? Oh, how amazing. You directed it. What did you do with the lobster guy? That's a tough bit. It's basically two people in a room, this play, based on Patti Smith and Sam Shepard. They wrote it when they were having an affair together, and it's a woman who has a club foot has held this man hostage who has a newborn baby and a wife somewhere else, and she's holding him hostage in a motel room. That's the whole play. And then a guy dressed as a lobster turns up with a phone. It's very abstract, but it's an amazing play because it has that Shepard essence of the sort of tragedy of obsessive love, like this completely codependent relationship they've created inside of this one motel room, and it's like the play smells when you read it. It's a really smelly play. It's great. It's such a brilliant play. And I thought of that character a lot. And that character was inspired by Genet and, all of Patti's heroes, Rimbaud. And so I just kind of, even though Evangeline didn't have any of those cultural references, and I didn't want to play her like some kind of bohemian or erudite character. I wanted all of that to like live in her. I wanted her to be an old soul. So that was kind of, what I was going for.
And when Damian Lewis was here, we talked about doing an American accent, and he's someone else too who, I mean, a lot of people met him via Band of Brothers, and I think people were shocked that he was an American. And you're someone else who I think just, you have such an ease with it. And how do you get into, I'm so obsessed with accents. How do you get into, like, what is your mouth doing when you are acting this character specifically? Is it just unconscious at this point and you're so able to glide in and out of it?
The back of the, microphone. The back of my tongue is high. There's a technical term for it I'm sure you'd all understand, but just in layman's terms, the back of my tongue's high, and I push more breath out. I wanted her to have the East. I wanted the East to be somewhere in her voice, as in the East Coast of America, the Southeast, specifically. But she's from the Panhandle in Florida.
It's a very specific accent too. It's not Southern. It's not East Coast.
It's a strange accent.
And it's very small. Only a very small area of people.
But I also wanted her to have an affect of something else. Kind of like she's trying to sound like she's from New York. And I just like the sound of her, being the broken, that kind of a height, that being really, she's almost that she's a broken bird, that kind of a thing. Did that answer your question?
No, it totally makes sense. And they were open to all of that. You came to set and they said, great, that works.
They literally just let me get on with it.
Really?
The thing about,
really
about
great,
KZK is that's their huge strength, is they just let you, it was such a bespoke thing in the sense that they just kind of, there's an idea of something, but they completely let us have free reign with the characters. And I loved that. It was so satisfying for that reason, It was really cool.
And how did you feel about the nudity that you had to do in season 2?
That was my idea.
I had a feeling for some reason.
Did you? No,
I did, because the scene, because it's not a sexual, quote unquote, sexual scene. She's sort of dancing and she's on the bed with her heels on, and it doesn't feel like gratuitous. It actually feels like that's something that this woman would do.
Yeah, well, John and I talked about it, and I said, honest to God, if we were in a relationship, would you put your clothes on? He was like, no. I was like, no, I wouldn't. You're not like, oh, we've had sex and now we're going to put our clothes on and eat pizza.
Right. You have privacy in this hotel.
Maybe I just don't put my clothes on after when I'm eating pizza. I actually can't eat gluten, so.
There's gluten-free pizza.
It was my idea, or we talked about it. They were like, would you be okay to be like in it? I said, let's just be as natural as possible. Let's not be gratuitous in the other direction. Let's not, let's just really stay true to what's just happened. And it was really powerful because, apart from a few inappropriate comments from the crew members. God bless them. They're a lovely crew, but one of them did say to me, "I'm guessing you don't have your phone on you." And I was like, "Dude, bridge too far." And also, it's weird for me coming from the place that I came from, of like being a trained, doing a lot of Shakespeare and all that stuff, to then be naked with John Leguizamo eating pizza, gluten-free pizza, in a set in fucking.
Well, if
the
you have to be
Keys.
naked with someone, he's a good person.
I
to be
mean,
naked
he's
with.
great.
Yeah,
He's lovely.
Great. He's a theater guy
lovely.
too. Yeah.
And he's such an artist. He's incredibly respectful, very, very cool. Yes, he's lovely. So it just seemed like the right thing, and it was so powerful. Apart from those comments, it was so powerful because what was going on between John and I was so powerful because of me being naked.
But it also showed us, because I don't think we really knew up until that point what their relationship really was.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we didn't know how intimate they'd been. We didn't really know how long they'd been together, because it was still confusing at that point. So that sort of told us, okay, these people are a couple, at least for now.
Kind of heartbreaking the way that John played it, because John, what he gave Ozzy was Ozzy was devoted to Evangeline. It's this hopeless love triangle of her. She's so devoted to Danny, loves him so with all the purity that she can muster, and Ozzy feels the same way about her. It's a hopeless chase. Maybe Danny's secretly in love with Ozzy, and then it would be like just 3 dogs running around sniffing each other's asses.
So that's what we can look forward to in season 3.
Yes.
Some very colorful flashbacks. So speaking of season 3, so what is the status? Is it been greenlit? It's happening?
I don't know.
Okay. I did, because I hadn't heard for sure, but
Right. Well, I've been told what
I'm
happens
sure,
is...
I can't imagine it's not.
Right. I've not had experience of what happens with your character when you have another season of
You're used to
something.
just ending a character, it's done, moving on to the next
Yeah,
thing.
and so then, it was about a month ago, I said to my agent, what happens, moving forward? She said, oh, well, they pick your character up or they don't. I was like, oh. So, like, Evangeline could just, like, die on the roadside sort of thing. And
Getting killed off a show is a badge of honor. People just, you're on a great show when they kill you.
Oh,
really.
right. Okay.
Game of Thrones, maybe something in your
Well,
future.
there was a lot of tension on the makeup bus before the end of season 2. I don't know whether we would agree. We would have agreed with you there. Everyone was kind of like, "Who's gonna die?" Everyone was terrified. And then I had that thought, "Oh my God, I could die." Like I hadn't even thought that Evangeline could die again, just because the movie thing. Like I keep sort of forgetting that other things can happen. But I think it would be awkward seeing as where the season ends.
Right. We need clarity.
It's kind of awkward to get rid of her at this point.
Yes.
Having said that, if I do go on to play her again, it'll be the longest character I've ever played.
Wow.
Because I've only done films really and sort of a HBO type miniseries things. So I've never actually done anything that would be this long. So it's interesting.
That's good. Full-time employment's a wonderful thing for actors. Yes. I've heard that from people that you guys like to be employed. So. We actually have a couple audience questions. So we sort of briefly touched on this, but Adam wanted to know, what events specifically enabled you to segue from working in England to the US? Did you find representation here? Was there a specific project that brought you to actually filming here and it made you want to stay? It sounds like you've been in California for a while.
2 things. Firstly, I played Margaret Thatcher, and then got some nominations or whatever, and CAA had contacted me, and then I was in this film, Mingela's last film, which was a short film. I went to Cannes, got the Palme d'Or. No, nominated for the Palme d'Or. I was playing a 15-year-old punk, and they contacted me as 2 separate characters, so they thought that I was 2 different people or something. And then that caused a whole heap of excitement in CAA, much to my advantage. And so I had the opportunity to meet different people, not just in that agency, but in different agencies. I came out to do that, and I met a guy. And then I came back. I went back to England to shoot a couple of films, and the guy wasn't calling me back, who I met. So I moved here.
So he learned a lesson then. Okay.
Yeah. And that's a true story.
I think we believe you after having gotten to know you over the last half hour. And then Susan would like to know, and not sure how relevant this is to your experience, how long did it take before you felt like you could quit side jobs that you had, whether being a waitress, or maybe did you have a day job while you were doing theater, or were you just doing theater for as long as you can remember, and that's actually what you were making money at from the beginning?
I find this question really hard because I have a lot of respect for the fact that we're all trying to do it and we're all just trying to make our way. I've stopped acting 3 times. I stopped after Birdman, and I wrote a book. I took 2 years off. I didn't want to do it anymore. I stopped it when I ran away from home when I was 16. I was having a hard time, and I stopped it then for 2 years. And I stopped it another time just before I moved out here and started stalking that man.
You can't do both. You need to just do one or the other at that point.
I got a BAFTA nomination. I was like, awesome. I'm going to take 2 years off, have a nervous breakdown, and then stalk someone. Check, check, check. And since I was 9, I've never wanted for a job. And that's why I find that question hard to answer, because it's something that's kind of followed me around rather than me following it around. But all I could say about that, because that's my experience and it just is what it is what I'm passionate about is working with good people and making good work, and I have no interest in doing bad work with people who are not compassionate and who aren't brilliant and who don't want to push theatre or film forward. And I think that helps me be like the fridge, not the magnet, do you know? And I think people like pick up on that. I mean, that's the only sort of objective breakdown I could give of how I've approached everything, which was to have no plan whatsoever and just completely wing it. And I'm a great reader, and I have great friends who are here today, and I have great hobbies, and I have like a full life. And the happier I get, the more good things come to me. The less I start focusing on like what I haven't got or what I might want, the more comes to me. I'm just about to do a film with one of my heroes, Armando Iannucci, and I couldn't be more ecstatic or excited about it. I'm about to play Stalin's daughter. And that wasn't something I chased. He contacted me and said, it's not, the part doesn't really, it's not a very good part right now, but I think just being open to it.
So you're like a fixer. Directors come to you and they're like, we have a shit part. We know that you can fix
awful.
it. No, that's a huge compliment.
But also, it's a bit like me getting the scraps, isn't it?
It means that it's probably not fully developed on the page.
Here is not available.
And they know that you can bring life into it. That's my take.
That's very nice. No, the first thing I said to him was like, Armando, I'd play a clown. If you're involved in it. I just worked with Dayton and Faris, and they're 2 of the nicest people I've ever met, let alone worked with. And they're so empathic and have so much compassion. And they really, this is going to sound cheesy, but they really saw me. They really saw who I was. They noticed things. They noticed that I really liked music. And they sent me a Yoko Ono record today and all sorts of obscure shit that I like. But having a really good relationships with artistic people, it's invaluable. And they don't need to be the right people. They just need to be your people. Some of my most valuable relationships are, people who are just my right people, and they're not necessarily people in the industry or anything, but that definitely feeds into what I can do in my work, because I have a real experience of intimacy, without getting too deep.
And last question, do you still text with Madonna, and what do you guys talk about?
Yeah.
What does she say in her text? I have to know.
Well, the last thing I got from her was she's really good, Madonna, about birthdays. She's really good. So I always get something from my mum, never my dad. My dad's terrible. Never a boyfriend. My boyfriends always forget. Friends are great. And Madonna. And that was the last thing that I got from her. Is she always sends me, she knows I like white flowers, she always sends me flowers on her birthday. And I send her things like, I'll go into she loves really interesting little curios, so I'll go into like a secondhand, that store next to the secondhand record store on Franklin. I'll go there and like pick her up a book or something that smells of dust and it's got loads of pictures of old horses in and send it to her, and she's probably like, oh my God. Write a note, put a quote in from Byron or something equally as pretentious.
That's very sweet. That store owner has no idea where that book is going to, which is the best part.
They have no idea. Once I bought a ring from a designer who I've always championed. She makes rings out of dead animals, which is like just up my alley. And I gave one to Madonna I gave her this little claw. It was like a claw with a pearl in it, and honest to God, she almost fell over. She almost fainted. The woman. She was like, "Oh my God, oh my God, she's got it in her house." I was like, "Yes, yeah, she's got it." Oh my God, it's amazing the response around people. What fame does to people is amazing.
Well, LA serves as cautionary tale on all fronts on that topic. Well, we're not going to worry about you because you seem like you know exactly what you want, and that makes all of us happy. So thanks for being here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, guys.